Welcome to the May 2023 call for the maturity model of maturity model for Microsoft 365 practitioners. Today, we're going to be talking about applying maturity to your employee experience with our special guest star, Kevin McDonnell, who is going to guide us through his brilliance and knowledge of the topic. If you go to the next slide, our agenda for today, in case you haven't ever joined us before for one of these calls, we're going to give a little bit of an overview of the maturity model so that if you haven't seen it before or it's been a while, you can see what our basic thinking is. We'll show you what our artifacts and what's been going on in the content that's available online for you at learn.microsoft.com. We'll take a together mode picture because it's just fun and it's what we do on P&P calls. We'll talk a little bit about how you might be able to contribute this year in for the maturity model, and then we'll hand it over to Kevin, and he will impress us with his thoughts. Next slide, please. Kevin, I'm building you up. I don't know if that's going to work to your advantage or not. If you'd like to join us every month, and maybe you got this link from someone else, this is the recurring calendar series. When if you use this link, you'll get an ICS event that will add to your Outlook calendar and repeat every month. We do take some months off, and we'll show you on, I believe, the next slide what our upcoming schedule looks like. Nope, not the next one. So it'll come up. So this is what the maturity model consists of today, and it's an always evolving, always expanding, always refining effort, primarily based with the core team that you saw on that first slide, but also with the input of folks from these calls and conversations that we have offline, et cetera. So the purpose of the maturity model is to really give you a way to think about where your organization is in its use of the Microsoft 365 platform and where you might go in order to improve your organization's efficiency, productivity, revenue versus cost, all of that sort of stuff. We really take a business approach as opposed to a technology approach, even though this model is about Microsoft 365. So the idea is, you want to improve your organization using these technologies, not use these technologies sort of as the end goal. You want to think about what the approach is that you want to use in order to come at this well. You want to be able to discuss these topics well with your management. Lots of times the discussions are difficult to have because it's not about, are we using Planner? It's about what's actually coming out of that use and why it's a good thing for the organization. There's some ways to benchmark your organization to think about where you are and then sort of forge your path forward. The maturity model also can be sort of a socialization tool to talk through with your end users how they can start to think about using these tools in more advanced and sophisticated ways in order to reach better business objects. So the published competencies are the dark purple going down the left. We have, I think, about 10 of those. We've got some tools that you can use in order to do things like run a workshop internally or maybe show the recordings from these meetings to people internally. We're working on a couple of competencies right now that are in progress. If you have thoughts on those, of course, we're always looking for those. This is very much an open source kind of effort. Everything is on GitHub. We love to get contributions directly or just have conversations about it. And then there's some supporting articles that help you understand in more depth some of these concepts and how to go from one step to another. And I just talked way too much from that slide. So let's go to the next one. Excuse me. Got a little bit of a cold today. So the basic idea behind the maturity model is that there are different levels of maturity. And this is all based on the capability maturity model that came out of Carnegie Mellon back in the 70s or 80s, I think, talking about sort of a lowest level being 100, highest level being 500. Not everybody needs to be 500 at everything. Not everyone needs to panic that they're level 100 at some things. But when you read through each of the capabilities, you may find that you land in a certain level, and you may decide that you want to do better or leave it as is. So level 100 is, we're just, everything's sort of ad hoc, reactive. We're, things seem to be going okay, except that we're really just reacting to, the fires that we get, trying to keep the lights on. Lots of organizations start there. It's not embarrassing. When you start using a new platform, you don't know a lot about it. And then you may want to add sort of aim to level 200 or level 300. Level 200 is you're starting to get some routine. You've got some, so you still have some firefighting, but you've got people sort of generally knowing what they should be doing, but not necessarily always doing it the same way. By level 300, you've got processes in place. You've got some policies. You've got some standard operating procedures. People seem to be following the general approach to the things that are expressed in that particular competency. Level 400, we actually start to build feedback loops. We start to see, well, what are people actually doing, and how can we learn from what they're doing and build upon them and improve our processes, and of course improve the way we're using the technology to support that as well. Some of the metrics and analytic tools that the platform itself provides can help bolster your moving to level 400, like the audit log, like Power BI, like things like that. And then level 500, we start to think about things like AI, things like, looking across all of the things that we do and looking for patterns and looking for ways to improve the way the organization in general functions using the technology. In some cases, letting the technology tell us that stuff. And that's where some of the co-pilot technologies may come into handy soon. Onward, Kevin, if you would. So if you'd like to be part of our smiling faces, please turn on your camera and we will set up a together mode. I guess that might need to be me. I'm not sure if I can pull it off. Let's go with, I think, the classroom last time. Maybe we'll go with the, that's not enough. It's too many people, not enough people, right? Let's go with an auditorium, a dark auditorium. We're cooler.
Yeah, everybody turn on your camera so you can pop on. And we get enough people to do together mode.
Does everybody see that?
No.
Cool. No?
Yeah, I can. If you'll need to turn on together mode yourself.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Now it's working.
All right. So everybody smile, wave. We'll get this into the next bunch of slides so that you can look back at yourself and say, look how happy I was back then. All right. Let's go back to the regular mode. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so at this point, we all know the rules about how we can engage during these calls. We're happy to have you come off mute, contribute your thoughts. If you want to raise your hand, that's great. Feel free to do so. These conversations are better when they actually are conversations and not just presentation. So Kevin will probably have lots of interesting things to say. Next slide, please. So this is how you can get involved in the next year, or anytime really. You could present a case study. You can contribute to our GitHub repository where all these articles actually exist. You can provide us feedback. You can let us, any one of us, know, what you think. If you've got some better thoughts about how to do things, how, maybe we spelled something wrong, or maybe we've just totally missed a couple of concepts. We'd love to hear about those. Socialize the content, not just in your organization, but around the community. This is very much a community effort. So, we want the community to know that it exists, to talk about it, to use it where it is useful for them. This is you should consider this a safe space, so that if you have some thoughts and you don't think that they sound all that sophisticated, it doesn't matter. Just ask questions, and we're happy to help you out. Join these meetings, share, participate, watch, all of that sort of stuff. Next slide, please, Kevin. All right, this is our schedule for this year. We've had 4 sessions so far. This is our 5th. Today is employee experience. And then we've got new sessions coming up. There will be one in June, and then we'll take the summer off just because we find that attendance is incredibly low. We'll pick things up in the fall and keep an eye out for more information about those particular topics. Next slide. I think we're getting close to your time in the sun, Kevin. So this is just a list of the people who joined us in April. If you want to join any of the other Sharing is Caring efforts, that link will take you to a page on the PNP team website that has a listing of all of the different sessions that are going on in Sharing is Caring. This is one of them out of I think 6 or 7. Our next session I already talked about. Hopefully we'll be talking about data analytics. We're going to need to figure out how we're going to get somebody to do that for us. It occurs to me. Next slide, please. So it's the 3rd Tuesday, excuse me, 3rd Tuesday of every month, in case you haven't caught that. We already talked about this. Next slide. And here we go, Kevin. I think this is where you can take things away. If you want to come off mute and be yourself and talk about employee experience and the maturity model. Thanks a lot.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. And apologies to people, especially Zoe Wilson, if she's watching the recording. We have tried to use PowerPoint Live, but there's all sorts of fun and games cross tenants. So we did go a little bit Chris Whitty there. I know one of her pet hates and many others. So we'll do our best with the rest of it not to do that. My name's Kevin McDonnell. I'm a group manager at Avanade in the modern workplace area, Microsoft MVP, and one of the Viva explorers. Also co-host the Grey Hat Beard Princess podcast. And why am I here talking to you about employee experience? Well, let me have a look, what year it's about 22 years, I have been an employee in some form or other. And during that time, I've had some experiences. And I tend to try and listen to this and have felt that within the Microsoft space, there's so much that's happened that's focused around employee experience that when Viva came out, it was really important to me because it really said that we're not just talking about how to become more productive, how do we get more done. It's also about what matters. It's about putting the employee at the center. And it's interesting. We've got a definition here of employee experience from, I think it came from Gallup on there. But there's not really a common definition of what employee experience means. It's in the same way you haven't really got a blueprint on how to run a company, how to spread culture, how to build success. Lots of people, like my good self today, are going to tell you what's important to employee experience, but there isn't really that single definition that comes through. At the same time, organizations are now and business leaders want to create the best for their employees and lead their experience into that practice. And so they want some guidelines and things to look at. I think one thing to think about is when you are an employee, you actually go through a life cycle. And if we talk about that, there's lots of different ways of looking at this that I've seen. If you Google life cycle of employee, there's an awful lot out there. But I really like this one, actually, one that Marc shared with me when we were talking originally. And you kind of got those 3 areas. So you've got that pre-employee life cycle. You want to, when you're looking at maybe taking a role and you see a job come up or someone talks saying, hey, there might be something available there. You either know about that organization, could be some something like Microsoft, Avanade, some of the big consultancy or big organizations that are either global or nationally famous to you, and you know a bit, or you think you know a bit about their reputation. Could be a smaller partner, smaller organization that maybe you've vaguely heard of and you've got some opinion. Or maybe you go and you have a look at social media, you do a bit of Googling or Binging to find out more about them. You maybe go into Glassdoor and look at some of these reviews, and you start to build that picture of that organization looks like, and whether it's somewhere you would want to work. And obviously the job description will fill into that as well. So all that fits within that attract area. You then decide to go ahead and apply for that job and maybe have some interviews, and all of these points you're kind of hearing from people. You may hear from the recruiter, which could be connected with the organization, or independent. They're going to have their own perspective on there. You then go through, maybe you're lucky, well, hopefully you're lucky enough at this stage to have been hired. You're going through that hiring process, serving out your notice. Maybe you're getting some access to some form of portal that tells you a bit about it. It's all before you, that day one where you've joined. Maybe you've signed contracts, but you're still not formally an employee. What is that experience like, that pre-employee area of it? We then moved on to more the active stage. So you've got that day one, either going into the office for the first time, or maybe your laptop arrives and you can log on for that first thing. I moved companies in January and that was all remote for me. It was a few weeks before I headed into an office. You get that laptop, you've maybe got some meetings to go through, you have that onboarding process. You start to want to know, what can I do? What is it that I need to do? What's important? How can I do that? How can I start to connect with people? And as you start to go through that, you start to embed over the first 3 to 6 months. A lot of people talk about that 0 to 3 months as being important. For me personally, I think what makes me stick is that 3 to 6 months. You've gone through that embedding period, you feel part of the organization. Are you still being engaged? Are you still connected? Are you feeling that you're making a difference there? That engage element is really important. And then as you're there a bit longer, things like appraisals come through. How can you perform? How can you demonstrate to the organization that you're doing a good job? How can you yourself grow? How can you see your own personal development increasing? And where does that fit to the organization? Now, at some point, you're going to offboard, whatever happens, whether it's through you deciding to leave, whether it's them deciding that you're going to leave, whether it's retirement or possibly something slightly nastier, but hopefully not too often that one. There's going to be some form of offboarding as you leave the organization. And that is really important to the employee experience as well, because that will kind of inform whether you're going to come back to that organization, whether you think there's a connection, but also whether you recommend to other people. I left my previous employer at the end of December. I've already helped them hire 2 people, still have fairly regular conversations with a few people there, because I felt still part of and connection to that organization. That hasn't gone completely. I still talk to people from a few employees back that I still have that good feeling about, want to connect. There's a few people, a few organizations that I don't really speak to anymore. I haven't felt that connection back to the organization. And whether that's more formal, whether it's through friends and connections, or whether it's that kind of alumni relations. I know Microsoft has its own community of alumni that builds out from there. So you've got that life cycle and different considerations from that along the way. It goes through. I'm just going to bring up a slightly different view of that same life cycle. This is one I've used in the past as well, but I'm mostly using this because it fitted with one of my other slides that I didn't have to completely redo, if I'm entirely honest. That employee experience of me of making things easier, but you can see it fits along those same elements as well. Now, if we take on outside that employee life cycle, there's also what makes a great employee experience? What makes you talk about those organizations and say, yeah, it's a really good place to work. Yeah, it really matters there. And there's plenty of organizations out there like Great Place to Work. I think Forbes has its top workplaces. People that go in and interview people there, study, give you that stamp and say, hey, you're a great place to work. But what are the sort of things they look at? What is it that's important to an employee? And if we take Corinne here, entirely made up that name, don't know who this person is or which organization they're at, but they start to bring forward that important thing. So are they able to bring their best every day, and do they feel they're heard? Do they say when they give that feedback, it's kind of acknowledged, maybe acted on within that as well? Do you feel that connection back and forth with an organization? Are you encouraged to build meaningful connections outside of your immediate team? Now, this was something I found really interesting during the pandemic, where actually the teams I work with, whether it was the kind of direct organization team or the projects team, still had that fairly close-knit feeling. We kind of used the digital tools to connect, but outside of that, those I bumped into, maybe didn't formally speak to so often, those connections became a lot harder to build. And I think many people have seen that either through the pandemic or more of the hybrid working, that connection outside of your immediate team is a lot harder to work through. So do organizations support that kind of community feel to things as well as the more immediate team feel? Do you feel included as part of your company's culture? Does it matter to you, and does it feel like it connects with the way you think? Have you got a well-rounded view of your leaders and colleagues personally and professionally? I always find this a slightly interesting one and slightly controversial one, that many people disagree with this. They don't feel that your kind of personal, your natural self necessarily has to be an important part of work. You can have your work persona and your home persona. One of my managers at a previous organization, actually we had kind of dinner after work, and he invited his wife along because he's like, I'm really worried that you only see work me, not the real me. So I've brought my wife here just to embarrass me and show a little bit of the real elements from there. And I think it's a certain key thing that you feel more connected to people if you understand them personally, if you feel you like them as individuals or understand them more as individuals as well. Obviously, there are some people out there that maybe you don't want to, so it can be a bit of a risky one, but certainly looking at that well-rounded view of people as well. I think knowing what your leaders' priorities are and what you're doing, how that contributes to the organization, really helps you feeling connected and the ability to be empowered, as well as that finding answers and how you solve problems. You know, is it you go and speak to Marc because Marc knows everything, or find a Simon? There's always a Simon that knows what's going on and they can help answer and solve your problems. Or is there a more formal way that you know who to speak to about the right thing, maybe some topic that you can search for as an example on that can help you solve things as well? And connected to that as well, given there may be something there, are you trusted and encouraged to share your own knowledge? Or is it very much kind of, I've got my knowledge, let's keep it here, you've got to go and dig around and find that with other people? Is that culture of knowledge sharing from the top down and bottom up as well? Do you feel energized and empowered to do meaningful work, that you know what you're doing matters, whether that matters to the organization, whether that matters to you personally on there? I know, having come from a financial services background, it can sometimes be a slightly shaky view as to what you do matters within there, but that's sort of some of the challenges you've got. It's kind of understanding that, and more importantly, you feel empowered to be able to do the different things on there. Now, I've layered over this screen. When Viva first came out, Glint published their 6 pillars of employee experience, and they fit very nicely with a lot of these different elements. So it is that notion, I've said empowerment quite a lot, that's really important to the employee experience. Do you feel you can make a difference? Do you have the tools, services, information, knowledge to do that? Do you have that focus on growth? Do you know not just where you are now, but do you see that path ahead, which is so important to feeling connected to that organization? Do you have that ability to focus? Do you have that focus that you feel for the organization? You're not being dragged in too many different directions and getting to the end of the day, looking at your calendar and just seeing meeting and going, what did I actually do today? Have you got that focus and understanding where they fit into the wider picture? Do you feel connected with the organization, with people in that organization? Also with the tools and things that you need, slightly coming back to the empowerment, but are you connected with what you need to do to get things done? And then finally, that well-being. You know, we talked a lot about mental health. I know a lot of places talking about mental health week at the moment. Do you have that both physical and mental importance of you? And you do have all the information needed within there as well. So these kind of 6 ones neatly layer on with that. And one of the things, you can actually bring these things together. I hate it when people talk about all these different ways of looking at things and they're all completely separate. But I think these two form a nice matrix because some areas are more important than others. And these are all things to think about when it comes to maturity. Because if you're looking at when you're attracting people, yes, as an organization, you want people to have good well-being. But it's not the most important thing. Making sure that you can get across the purpose of the organization to that individual to make sure that it fits with their own purpose becomes important. As you move towards hire, you want to connect in with those people, make them start to feel part of that organization. And that continues into onboarding. And when you get into there, you also want to empower people. So when they get there from day one, they can hit the ground running, they can start doing what they need to do. They understand what it is they need to do, and they're not just given a big chunk of paper to read through and left for 3 weeks to sort themselves out. They know what they need to do to succeed in that organization, and that comes forward to the engage, which is across everything, and then understanding what they need to perform for the organization, develop, and you also want to create that connection and purpose when they leave, either for them coming back or to pass on to other people as well. Now, I do like to get cats into my presentations at some point for no other reason than cats are amazing. Sorry, dogs and dog lovers out there. But it's important all with this employee experience. A lot of people kind of feel this in an idealistic world. Yes, it would be lovely to care what employees think, but I've got a bottom line to think about. I've got day-to-day challenges that I need to focus on. Why should I invest time, money, budget, people into making sure the employee experience is important? Because I can't really see any value in that. Why should I, whether I'm at a top level in the organization, whether I'm a team lead, whether I'm just part of a team somewhere, why should I care about the employee experience of others? Well, the good news is there are stats that are available out there. Some of these are from the more recent Work Trend Index that was released was it a few weeks ago now, I think, on there. Some of these from the earlier ones, some from other elements like Gallup and patients there. There are all sorts of stats out there, and I know you can prove 97.7% of things with stats that are just made up, but these have come from real life experiences. And I think the number that show the increase in profitability of having engaged employees, the value that it is to your bottom line is really important and a great sales point. If you want to come to retention, keeping people, again, can fit to your bottom line, because the cost of the kind of lost time you get as people serve out their notice, their kind of amount of engagement drops and they get less done, and then other people need to pick up. And when someone new starts, you've got to go through that hiring process, which costs as well. You've got to get people onboarded, all of these cost on there. And if you invested just a little fraction of that into learning and development, then more people are likely to stay. And we can see over here that highly engaged employees are 12 times less likely to stay. So the value of engaging those is massive as well. If we look at the more recent Work Trends Index from Microsoft, we can look at productivity as that, looking and understanding the amount of time that people are in meetings, the amount of focus that they can have and how they can be productive. There's been a 192% increase in the number of Teams meetings and calls per week since February 2020, which is just absolutely insane. And thank you for giving some of your time to join another one of those. And hopefully you can learn and get some value from this as well. But we also know that interruption to focus time and having people focusing on the different things, all of these cause problems. They impact your bottom line. They impact how likely people are to stay at an organization. And that's why employee experience is so important from there as well. Now, I did say on here, let's trigger a poll. I had a feeling this may be a little bit tricky with cross-tenant one. So instead of a poll, if you could just put in the chat some of the things that are really important to you as an employee. I promise we won't share these back to other people. So be as honest and open as you can with this. But where you're working now, or maybe where you've worked in the past, what are the things that you feel are particularly important? What makes you feel engaged in an organization? What makes you feel happy to do that little bit extra? And what keeps you engaged over time? What are the important factors? Just put down a word, a little phrase, or anything into the chat of what you feel is important. We'll give everyone a little bit of typing time on there. And we can see there, I can see some of the elements, that connections, that friendships, that's making a difference. To me, that sort of fits with that purpose. I love that organic communication across departments. I absolutely agree on that. Knowing that it's not just, yeah, my little team, we're all happy together. Ugh, I don't like them over there. They're rubbish. We don't want to work with them. You want to be able to build those bridges between different areas. I love some of the things, I know I wouldn't talk too much about Viva, but Viva Insights kind of graph view of things, of how different people communicate and connect, is always fascinating as well within that. And love to see well-being brought and sought within that as well, and making me pause and think, I wonder if I haven't brought enough well-being into this maturity model. But let's see what you think. So I started off by saying this is all about employee experience. This isn't about Microsoft Viva. And those eagle-eyed among you may be looking at that going, yeah, Kev, you said that, but aren't those things along the top? Isn't that the Viva pillars? Yeah, yes, is the short answer to that. But the reason is because, to me, Viva is a brand. It's not a tool. It's a set of things that are important to employee experience in a group of areas. And I love what Microsoft done by kind of evolving the initial, there's kind of learning and topics that went there along with connection insight. They've grouped those together under growth. They've brought goals under purpose. Connections brought what was Yammer, now Viva Engage, into these areas, because they're what's important to these different areas of employee experience. I do personally feel they're missing some elements, which is what I've tried to bring into this as well. So where we have connections, obviously there's a natural place in connection that if you've seen bits of Viva, you've seen about news and communications with those Viva connection sites, SharePoint sites powered in there, bringing those things through, the community with Viva Engage. But I think also, and I think Simon Hudson, I think you brought this one up, I absolutely agree that diversity and inclusion comes into this as well, making sure that you feel connected because you feel naturally part of that organization. You're not from a group that feels excluded, that your own personal experiences are brought into that as well. And also think that personalized nature to things, making sure that what you see is relevant to you, whether that's the tools, the knowledge, the different areas fit within that connection area. Going into insight, again, the top two are much about that Viva Insights. It's that feedback with things like Glint and Viva Pulse that's upcoming, those regular surveys from other areas like Qualtrics and Towers Watson obviously does a lot of survey elements. That ability to provide feedback so that managers, department leads, leaders can see what people are thinking. And then connecting that with specific analytics on there. Now, I know employee monitoring can be a sensitive area, so we're looking very private within this, using aggregated numbers, making sure we're not doing that desktop monitoring, looking when people move away from desks or maybe present to a community call in the middle of their working day, that sort of thing. But I think also within Insight, there's not just the understanding from those top level managers, it's also the understanding insight that individuals have to what's happening with employee experience. So if you're providing feedback and you're complaining about things or saying, I'd love to see this happen, where does that go? Are people listening to that? We talked about that visibility of things listening. And are things that are being changed to that clearly communicated to people so you can see that change? Are these things being put in and made clear to people as well? I'm just trying to go a little bit quicker, and I'm not going to speak through all the maturity model. I'll flash those up in a sec. When it comes to growth, we're looking at that learning, that building of knowledge from there, that kind of natural thing about having a learning platform, having that skills growth on there, knowing what you don't know, finding ways to learn from other people. But all connected around that is a framework. how do you know what's important? If you want to move up the career ladder, what are those gaps in your learning, those gaps in your knowledge, those gaps in your own experience that you need to fill? Is that transparent to you? Is it clear what hard skills, what soft skills, what experience you need to demonstrate to see that growth to people? So it's not just about providing the tools as Viva does, it's about providing that framework around that so you can see how you can move as well. And this connects in then with the purpose, the culture of an organization, the culture of that workplace, how people work within there. And I think as well as, we'll talk about vision and strategy on there, but that focus at any one point in time, not if we look at Microsoft's empower every person on the planet to do more. I think I've butchered that slightly. That's kind of the grand vision on there. But what is important right now? Are things like sustainability a core focus? Are there particular areas that are more important than others at this point in time that becomes important? And having that link down to the alignments as well. So that's not just from the top. Everyone knows the importance and their focus they're playing within that as well. I'm going to pause slightly there and just see if there's any questions. I've kind of been keeping half an eye on the chats, but if there's anything people feel missing from those top level areas before we go into the full model itself. Simon H.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything missing, but if you're sort of trying to reshape an organization, which of these would you tend to focus on first? You can't focus on everything because that isn't called focus. So what would you start with?
Well, I would probably say the feedback and the insights area, because what you should be focusing on is what's most important to the employees. So understanding what those issues are, communicating those back and saying, we've heard you on this, and then here's what we're doing about it, which would then probably fit in with those other areas. And we'll kind of cascade naturally down to link to that news and communication. But it really is about what is the most important area to people at that time. And the best way to find that is that feedback. For me personally. Okay, I'm going to try and move through these, and I'm not, obviously we will publish this out, so we'll make a draft available out there on there. I've got 5 of these to go through, and I'm not going to read through every one. You'll be very, very happy to hear. So I'm going to try and pick out some key areas, because I've taken that overall employee experience maturity and taken that 100 to 500s within there. I've been speaking with the rest of the team and others on there, and Leslie. I shouldn't forget Leslie. It is hard to forget Leslie once you've met her, to bring on there. Oh, it's my camera disappeared. Appear to have frozen. Hopefully you can hear me and it's come through, but I've taken this general one, and then each of those pillars of connection, insights, growth and purpose have looked at the maturity of those as well. It's fair to say there's a little bit more we could do and build out from that too. So if we take this overall one and spend a little bit longer and then slightly less than the others, I'm going to try and go through all and then open up for questions and jump back and forth. I kind of hope this is going to be PowerPoint live and people could look through on their own leisure, but well, technology, eh? If we look at that level 100s, really employee experience isn't considered by management. By the way, if you see me write EX, I've just noticed I haven't put that in brackets. That is employee experience. It helps us delineate for those in the UK from telephony providers. So talking about the EX on there, it's not considered by management, no experience are captured. There's no real feedback that comes through. It's organic rather than designed. Lots of frustration with different elements and little trust or empowerment, poor communication. It sounds a lovely place to go and work. As we move up through the different areas, we start to think about that vision. We start to think about that culture being established in some areas. There's bits of alignment, but not consistent. The training is powered by what's needed, not necessarily what's wanted on there, some onboarding, etc. We start to go up to having more of that company culture and vision, that it's a core goal for the organization. There's that growth, onboarding experiences planned. As we go up, this is starting to sound like a nice place to be, feeling energized, empowered, and valued as well. As I was practicing this, I was saying, well, at least you perceive to be valued. Who cares whether you do? As long as you think you're valued, that's the important one that comes through from that side. But people know their purpose, what their priorities are, and how they can have an impact to the organization and how they can be heard. That 360 communication that's up to date and appropriate. We've got that culture that comes through, on-demand learning. We've got that full life cycle. And then we kind of take that further, that little bit extra. It's that leadership accountability for things. It's actively manage this, those analytic tools to truly understand that. So I'm going to try and flick through the other ones. If we take that, so that's a lovely merge one. I didn't notice that. We've got that connection. So talking about, central news team, no real formal communities. D&I meets legal minimum at best. From there, as we go up, we're starting to talk about federating out that communication so it empowers other teams. You're starting to talk about governance, self-service on there, employee interest groups feeding into this. You start talking about approvals when you get into level 400. And really that 500 is that comms team. They're supporting individuals, teams and departments to share news. Communities are well established and governed. They're combined with those centrally focused ones, with those employee-driven communities that are active on there. It's clear analytics to understand what is needed. There's lots of diverse and inclusive culture supported by employee interest groups, and services are personalised and sharing knowledge to the right people at the right time. Going through here, if we look at maturity, again, we're looking at that no understanding of employee sentiment, little feedback on there. As we go up, we start to bring in regular, either quarterly or annual surveys. You're thinking your management chain to communicate that. Going up, we're starting to bring in more regular surveys and even bi-weekly pulse surveys without a bracket, I just noticed. Bi-weekly surveys with transparent ones. You've got those employee forums to provide additional feedback. And as we go up, you start to think about that employee experience board, those aligned initiatives based on what is coming out from that feedback. And at the top level, they're very clearly understood, they're monitored, and those initiatives are clearly communicated. Go through onto growth. Again, we're looking at no formal training programs, starting to bring in the portal abilities to have that knowledge. You're starting to think about knowledge subject matter experts on there. This think about roles and pathways as we go up. They're very clearly understood, those growth frameworks. You know where to go. Leading up to that fantastic experience, you've got that learning experience platform supported with that growth framework, so you know what you need to do to progress. You've got training that actively supports the strategy of the organization, and knowledge is easy to access and create. And finally, before I open the floor to other people, so start thinking about what you want to add to this on there and get your hands up and questions in. If we think about purpose, you've got that no defined organizational strategy, no consistent appraisal process. You've got that vision and strategy starts to get known, starts to get more clearly communicated, start to think about an aligned process for your goals and align your individual to strategic goals. You start to think about those key results, those measures for defining success for those goals. The culture of the organization is well understood and generally adhered to. And the top level, you've got that clear strategy that's aligned from the top down, the bottom up. You've got key results, hopefully as automated as possible for the vast majority. It's well understood. And those key initiatives aligned to those areas to ensure understanding as well. And I'm going to take a breath and see if there are thoughts. I'm going to go back to top level because I think we're probably focused mostly on that, but I can jump around and just see what the thoughts were on others around that, those characteristics. Simon, I can see you've mentioned there talk of mentors and buddy systems. I think so. That's a really interesting one. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I mean, obviously, yeah, we're all thinking on our feet as you've displayed these, but as we were going through that growth piece, I was pondering, how else do we get the information, and not just the information, but that sort of access to experience and expertise. And you get some of that from, I don't know, search and documents and that knowledge base that exists formally in the organisation, but so much of it needs to come from the subject matter experts and the people who are just old hands in the organisation and know how to get things done. So that feels to me a bit like some kind of buddy system or mentor or somebody who has a personal interest in helping you become better.
Yeah,
and I think that's a
a very good
400 level thing, but I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think I'd put it around that level as well. I think the only one I was pausing is where that comes under growth or purpose, but I think it is about learning and improving. If we think, I'm trying to think that there's often more than mentors. There's another common phrase for it, sort of for the more senior people as well. So I think definitely up near that level.
I think. Sorry.
Mark. Yeah. No.
I think a lot of people think that employee experience is something that is done to them, as opposed to something that they participate in. If you think about a sort of a rank and file employee reading some of these levels and thinking about, well, how can I contribute to our organization moving up? It's not necessarily just about the tools. It's about, how do I talk to the people in my team? How do I interact with my manager? How do I talk about successes and failures? All of that sort of stuff. So I think a lot of that stuff is what I think of as the squishy stuff, right? It's not the technology stuff. It's you
Absolutely.
use the technology in order to do those things effectively, but you have to change your mindset and not expect that you're entitled to a good employee experience, but that you participate in it.
No, I think it's a great point there, and I think that's where the kind of two-way, that 360 communication, that making sure that you
Right.
feedback, and I think it's acknowledging that as well. I think that's such an important thing for an organization to acknowledge that your voice is heard and reflect on that.
And
certainly something I've seen disappear.
You can
Sharon.
always tell when you come into an organization that has a mature employee experience of some sort, because I mean, if you just kind of know, right? If you go into an organization that is welcoming and open and has an onboarding program and has somebody to kind of walk you through everything, and you feel, you know what your purpose is, you know what you're doing, you know where you're going. I feel like you can see it. Whereas when you go into organizations, and we've all been there, especially in technology, where they say, here's your laptop, here's your cube, have a nice job. We know that they probably don't have a very mature employee experience model.
Sharon, I was just going back through the comments, and something you said I thought was fantastic, and you talked about reflecting on what went badly on there, and I think that's an important thing. It's not just listening, but kind of being open and honest and say, yeah, we tried something and it didn't work across there. I'm a huge fan of the agile, and my brain's suddenly gone dead, the kind of reflections as part of that someone will hopefully nudge me on the right word for that. But I wonder if there's retrospective. Thank you. I wonder if there's something we could build that into the model as well, whether that's the kind of overall one or something more specific, a more specific area, maybe under the insights.
So at the risk of using the Viva word, I think there is some stuff about, sort of doing that, damn it, I can't remember what it's called, but the Teams reminds me to reflect on my day at the end of each day or week, whatever it is. That reflection on that. But what I'm not sure is how active that is. It's like, okay, so I reflected on it. Now what? Do I just go home pissed off because somebody was last, or is there a mechanism within the employee experience that either helps you handle your emotional response to that, or helps you handle the actual event that occurred? Because I've left companies because of bad experience before. I mean, I quit very highly paid jobs because of bad experience.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for me, what I've loved about that reflection back is I'm so fed up. I felt bad for weeks, and I look at that, it's like, oh, actually, maybe it was only a few days, and last week was actually better than I thought. So that kind of being clouded by where your headspace is right now, to me, the personal reflection has helped that, and vice versa. I was like, oh, I'm having a good day. Oh yeah, that was last week. So it does work both ways. But I think I'm trying not to get clouded by what Viva does, because I know obviously within Viva, no one else can see that. Only you Microsoft can't see it, the organization can't see it as a whole, so you don't get that pulse across the organization within that. But I think that's an important thing to look at, to see those trends as well. We all know that, especially many of us who are here now who are speakers, that kind of May time, May, June and time with lots of conferences, it's always busy. I know if you look at consulting, you see those kind of peaks around end of year budget time when everyone gets busy and things like that. And recognizing that sometimes there is that kind of common feel, and yes, everyone may be feeling stressed, but we shouldn't react too quickly because there's kind of other factors that lay into that, and realizing those patterns are really quite important as well.
But I think that goes back to your point in the insights part, where if you're using your insights to create your goals and your OKRs, if you're not creating some level of goal around employee experience that you can hold a value and a metric to, then how do you know that you're trying to do something? You know, people feel things and they can have their independent feelings and reflections of how their own jobs are going. But I think if at an organizational level, your goals are around a good employee experience and you're constantly using that feedback and those insights to then turn around and create goals that are going to make things better, then I think people can hold on to that and say, okay, I know you're trying to make it better, so I'm going to stick with this to get there. So I think that has something to do with that constantly, from a retrospective perspective, if you're having a regular meeting on those goals and insights to move forward and make progress all the time, hopefully there's some level of understanding, not just financial goals, not just business goals, but also employee experience goals as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting with the, the regular contact. Forget about the tools for a second, but having regular one-to-ones where your manager's helping you be successful in the organization, because then that helps you understand what you need to do, get that purpose. And forget about the tools for a second, but it's important that organizations do that, because that's how you get buy-in as a manager. That's how you can help support your team to do what they need to be able to do to make the organization successful and make themselves successful too. So yeah.
And I'm going to put this next statement with a massive caveat of I need a bit more evidence and detail on this. But there was a couple of articles I've read recently about how the importance of managers is often overblown. And if you have the right culture, the importance there isn't quite as important, because you connect within the kind of leaders within your team, the leaders within different areas. So I'm not sure quite how much, and as I say, I need to flesh this out a bit more, but I think there's a lot, you talk about one-to-one time is absolutely vital, whether it's with your manager, because that expectation of a bad manager can make things a lot worse as well, whether there's that, someone made the comment of people leave because of a bad manager, absolutely. And I think there's almost a slightly traditional view of things about, yes, we must fit within that manager area. I know many organizations are kind of certainly moving away from that phrase. Here at Avanade, we have career advisors, and they're not necessarily directly within the team you're in. You can move between different career advisors, and it gives you more of that flexibility to things, and sort of starts to take away that importance of that for communication, sending messages down. You have HR for the more HR aspects, and it kind of floats it around a little bit more. But I certainly would like to read more about that and understand a bit more about the different options with that as well. Just one thing, I lost the kind of track, but Iqbal mentioned something earlier about silo thinking and politics, and that word politics I thought was really interesting, because the number of times that I felt my employee experience has dropped because of internal politics, people competing against each other, has been massive on there, and kind of drives a lot of that. And I wonder where politics fits into the employee experience. If anyone had any further thoughts on that.
When people say politics in terms of the employee experience, are they ever talking about a good thing? I mean, I think that tends to be used as a negative term. I think having worked in some very large organizations, I think we all have to learn, what's the horse trading environment here? How do I get things done? And that effectively as the politics, but it's often a barrier as opposed to an enabler.
Yeah, political culture definitely tends to scream an immature culture where you are still transactional based instead of learning based or, innovation based. And it's where people are probably hoarding knowledge. They're probably trading, like you said, horse trading stuff, as opposed to more of a high mature organization and high mature model where people are encouraging and promoting growth and better culture and things like that. So yeah, I agree. I think political tends to kind of imply that you're still kind of a little bit lower maturity model.
I would view this as like, well, politics being a fixed mindset, not diverse, not inclusive, meaning toe a certain line. Worst kind of politics is when decisions are based on past decisions. So your future is trapped, right? It becomes a spiral that is, it's almost like, we decide to do certain things because we made certain commitments and decisions in the past. The lack of adaptation. I have seen some of the largest companies fall into that trap, regardless of their progressive or their intent to be progressive.
And that depressing view of everything's changed since the pandemic. And I don't know about anyone else, but it's feeling like those old ways are creeping back in pretty heavily. I see Simon talking about continuity biases there, but yeah, really, really good point with that, Iqbal. There's something else someone said, and I've lost it again. Yeah, it was something Simon said around teams. Teams need more immediacy in how the team is doing compared with the company as a whole. My only thought to that, I think it's good to see that, but is that not where politics come in? Because you've got competing teams, and that's how you want to outdo other people on there. So how you bring in that competitive nature in an effective way? I don't know, Simon, if you had any thoughts on that.
Thoughts? No, not yet. I need to go and think about how we differentiate it between the sort of what you might call the tactical level, but certainly the need to team dynamics and team cohesion can change really quickly. You can piss an entire team off in one meeting and then spend days trying to rebuild that. So I get that, whereas I think organizations tend to change more slowly. So the tools you need to be able to monitor and manage your team, and whether that's department sized or a couple of people, I think are different to the way that a company would look at it. Company feels more like a portfolio approach, and teams, it's more like, I need to get this sorted out now. But how we do that, I've got no insight right now.
No, I think that's an interesting one, and that I certainly feel the kind of politics and how teams work together is something that maybe we're missing a little bit from here, or could be expanded on.
I have a view where there's people, there's politics. The point being, most important point being.
So you're saying replace us all with robots, or
is that decisions are essentially focused on the benefit of the organization, not the silo, not just the team, not short term but longer term competitive advantage, business outcomes focused, not fiefdoms, not personal, individual.
Yeah. I agree.
And is that where sort of OKRs and things like that help, because they help people know what those right decisions might be for the organization? And the OKRs help teams stretch outside of the team to talk with other teams, based around.
And OKRs are often cascaded, and they become a collective participation.
Absolutely.
As opposed to hippo mentality or
Yeah,
That's
absolutely
definitely going
right.
to paraphrase. I'm very aware of the time, so I just want to start to wrap up. Leslie Crook helped a lot with these, and unfortunately, she decided to go on holiday, which I think is outrageous, not wanting to spend her own personal time on these elements. I mean, what sort of employee experience is that? But very much joking there. She's put together this fantastic Viva origami. I was there when she first brought it to Collab Days in Bletchley Park, and it's evolved since then. I saw her when she presented it to Jeff Teeper as well, who loved the idea too. So you can get hold of this, and if you remember these, you can kind of open it up and bring it through and drill down from where you're looking to enable growth, looking at what the services that can help with that within the Viva space and the wider Microsoft 365. So I put that in the chat for people as well. Otherwise, Mark, I will hand back to you if you wanted to wrap up.
Sure. If you go to the next slide, I think that slide. Yep. So this is all of the links that you can use to get to our materials. One slide before Parker. All the links and slides, links to the slides, the YouTube channel, the articles themselves, everything that you might need to know about the maturity model. We will have our next call on June 20th, which is the third Tuesday of June, and I believe we're talking about data and analytics, if we can put that together. Exactly. We have our work cut out for us, but we'll have some interesting guest stars, I'm sure. Thanks for joining us, and thank you very much, Kevin, for taking your time to share your knowledge with this practitioner group. I think it's very helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. See you later.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.